I don't hear music now. I do hear it now.
There was a time many years ago when the flat earth wars were fought. Eric Dubé and his dubious claims from a book by Parallax. He hypnotized with his droning lies and the flat earth wars began. But cool hard logic stepped into the fray and rained down simple facts. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Sergeant Mark was mad as a lark when he said he'd won his skirmish. He said he'd beaten all those cowardly men who studied astrophysics. But nary a soul had suffered a blow, 'twas a story, nothing more. And Sergeant Mark kept on telling that tale till 2054. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted.
You know, I could learn this on acoustic, play it sometime.
Sleeping warrior, well, he had an egg when he stepped into the fray. He added some salt to the water and all the gravity went away.
Hey, how you doing, boss? I heard you tweaking over some games.
Holding us down. 'Twas an 8th grade science ploy. And AB Science and many more made Anthony their toy. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted.
You and the rest of the mob.
When the globebusters looked into their pond, they saw a great black swan. Then they tried to prove with a ludicrous move that there never was any white swans. Mr. Sensible stepped into the fray with a lens as clear as day. But Mitchell, he won't listen to facts and he waved the truth away. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Well, many more battles were fought than the ones I have recounted. Fight the flat earth and Sly Sparkane had Kavanaugh stuffed and mounted. Father Skeptic, well, he came in peace, but Nathan, he ran away. He ran to the schoolyard to fool the children until he was taken away.
So, like, full disclosure.
Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Aye, aye, the flat earth wars, yes, Oakley screamed and ranted. Oakley screamed and ranted. Oakley screamed and ranted. Oakley screamed and ranted.
Well, hi, everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy, and we've got some special guests with us tonight. The first you may recognize up in the upper right is Broman from BromanLegion. He and I have done a couple of collaborations together.
What's up?
And he's a pretty good guy. Let's go see. Broman, can everybody hear you okay?
I'm not sure. Everybody tell me. Can you hear me okay?
How's Broman's volume out there? And while we're waiting for a little feedback on that, I want to introduce Kyle, my son.
Hi.
This is Kyle. He's going to take over the channel someday, so I figured I'd get him warmed up early. Now, today we're going to have a look at Nathan Oakley and his explanation of gravity. Now, Broman and I have looked at this, and we're fully functional adults, more or less, you know, with jobs and all. But Kyle is right on the cusp of being a
graduated.
fully functional adult. He is just graduating from high school now. So we're going to play Are You Smarter Than a High School Senior? All right, so everybody can hear me. Everybody, you got to move a little closer there, kid.
Okay.
Yeah, he was wearing a green shirt originally, and that wasn't going to work out well.
Hey, smart until I die.
Now, Broman, everybody can hear you just fine. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit to our folks here?
Hey, what is up? I'm Broman. I run a channel called BromanLegion. I do a lot of flat Earth videos myself. Right now, I'm working on debunking the 200 proofs, or I guess 200 things Eric Dubé doesn't fully understand. But the book that every flat earther in modern day attributes their belief to, one at a time. I've gotten through maybe 35 of them so far, something along those lines. I also do other stuff though too. Have some music, even some gaming content on my channel as well. So a little bit of a variety show.
Well, you know, Chris Durham, who is the author of our theme music, is actually in the chat right now. You play acoustic guitar too, don't you, Broman?
I do, yeah. I play acoustic and electric guitar. Yeah.
Well, maybe you two could get together because you were saying, heck, I could learn how to play this. Well, the guy that wrote it's actually in the chat right now. That's Chris Dunham Music Channel.
It's fun. I like it. It's a lot of blues, a lot of pentatonic. It'd be real fun to play around with.
Nathan Oakley, one of my three Nathans. You know, I've got that new series, Nathans Being Nathans. And he's been featured in that along with, of course, Nathan Roberts and Nathan Thompson. But this video is called When the Penny Drops, Outer Space is Fake. So now, Kyle's never really seen a Flat Earth video before, so this is going to be a new experience for him. It's one of those life events that you really need to have.
He sent me the link to the video earlier, and I got about halfway through it before I literally just couldn't take it anymore. I ran downstairs. I just laughed. I laughed my ass off.
Is my audio louder now? Am I being heard better now?
Yeah, you're looking pretty good for me, and your system audio looks good.
Yeah, so I just got to say, I was watching bits and pieces of this video, and I am so triggered by every tiny thing that this video has. It's unbelievable the amount of times that you just want to reach through and smack Oakley, but you can't. So
smack him like a toddler, huh?
You know, something along those lines. He's I haven't had a lot of experience with Oakley, so this is kind of a new for me as well. So.
The thing that really irritated me about the whole video is the way he literally just talks over everybody and doesn't let anybody fully explain their points, and then tries to debunk a half-explained point. It's like, what's the point in that? Like,
he's
let somebody fully explain their thoughts and then take on that. But he's trying to dictate the flow of the conversation and redefine everything. So if there's even a split second where he thinks that you either accidentally use the wrong word or are going in a direction that works against his own personal definition, he's going to immediately stop and try to redirect it right back in. It's nonsensical.
Well, he's got a trained voice and he understands debate tactics, but they're not legitimate debate tactics. You and I could have a debate. You and I could flip a coin and one of us could be a flat earther and one of us could be a globe earther. And we could have a decent discussion with rules of common decency between us and make valid arguments to try and support them. All right. You can't do that with Oakley. No. You know, he'll use every underhanded tactic he thinks he can get away with. And while we do that, we're going to go ahead and get started with the video. I'm going to turn off my mic, and you'll be able to hear it on your end too, Broman.
I do think that the Earth is a globe.
What's your response, Daddy? Was your response, if you don't have gravity as a force, then you don't have it, as in you don't have a sky vacuum?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you think, well, if you're going to say gravity doesn't exist, and if that's the argument, well, then you can't have a vacuum next to gas. You can't. But that raises another problem. That is there infinite air?
Right? No.
How high does it go?
Sorry, your conclusion. So let me get it straight. Your conclusion is that you can't have a sky vacuum if entropy is real, which it is. And further to that, you've got some questions. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, your sky vacuum's not real. I couldn't care less about your questions. We've all got questions once we find out that we've been lied to on a massive scale.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that I'm already angry. I'm not angry, but I'm because the first thing he said is okay, so your point is that you can't have a sky vacuum, and common tactic, right? Using a common scientific term and just trying to make it sound ridiculous in some way or another. So he's like, oh, it's a sky vacuum. But he says, you are saying that you can't have a sky vacuum, which is not at all what the person said, right? The person said what you just said, which is that if you don't have gravity, then obviously you don't have gas next to a vacuum like space. But Oakley immediately turns it around and mischaracterizes the argument as if somehow the guy agreed with him when he said the exact opposite of what Oakley said. So it's already crashing. There's no sentient direction in Oakley's argument from the start. So
yeah, he instantly changed the entire point. Like, he's trying to debunk a point that wasn't even made.
Yeah, that's called a straw man fallacy.
That's exactly
argument.
what I was about to say.
And it's just ridiculous. The point that I'm making, or that the caller was making, is that there's no limit to the atmosphere because there's no barrier or no gravity holding and limiting the amount of atmosphere over the surface of the Earth. By definition, there has to be infinite air,
or we wouldn't be here.
And infinite air would have infinite mass. And it's just kind of, it's a great point. I've not heard that point made before.
But you appreciate at a fundamental level that you can't have a sky vacuum. It stands in violation of natural law. So you now understand that outer space is fake. You understand and appreciate that. It stands in violation of natural law.
It stands in It stands in violation of natural law.
That's right. Outer space is fake. It stands in violation of natural law.
Okay, so I've gone back. We're back to Broman right now. I've put Oakley on mute for his little 90s introduction here. But basically, he's already trying to make the argument for the caller rather than let the caller make his own argument, which is, a typical Oakley tactic.
Yeah, he's speaking over the guy and patronizing him while he does it. Like, he's not there for a legitimate debate. He's there to talk down to somebody who has a different belief set than him and is not willing to actually, back up his points. He's changing the arguments completely to something that he thinks is correct when it's just not.
Well, he says things that are fundamentally untrue as well, like the argument that the vacuum of space is in direct violation of the laws of nature, which I'm pretty sure goes back to the second law of thermodynamics argument that Nathan Thompson made at one point. I think they all parrot that ad nauseum. But it's just no surprise that it's a fundamental misunderstanding of just basic things. I mean, I guess it's not that basic, but yeah, I mean, it's not. It's only from ignorance, right? I mean, I don't think there's ever been a moment where these arguments get made and somebody rational goes, oh, you know what? That's a pretty good point. I mean, on the surface, sometimes maybe, but just, I mean, it's as soon as you dig, there's nothing there. There's nothing substantial holding it together.
Well, Broman, basically what's going on is they're not doing science, they're traveling.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. You never saw Sovereign Citizens? They're not driving, they're traveling.
Oh, yeah. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm a free inhabitant under the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
But
the whole straw man thing, the whole
back to what you were saying earlier, though. When I actually went out to talk to my dad when I got halfway through the video and couldn't stop laughing, that's the first thing I said, is every point he's making is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. What is space? Space is just the distance in between objects. Because gravity pulls all these objects together and holds them there, the space in between them is a vacuum. Gravity works by objects attracting to one another, but I'm gonna need to think that out more.
No, you're not doing too bad with that.
Yeah, I gotta think out my joke.
Yeah, Tessa got the joke. Tessa, you get to be a moderator for getting my joke. Yes, I do respond to flattery. All right, so let's go ahead and continue this. I'm going to put your sound back on.
And explode, and the gas would go in all directions. Now we have a heliocentric model that tells us we are a ball of gas in space.
So I have another point which I would like to counter to the fact that gas goes in all directions.
So you just want to totally disregard that you...
Oh no, this is an answer to this. Don't worry. So if you use relative density to explain gas relative to a vacuum, then well, you have a difference between 0 and the density of gas, which means that the gas would go down.
Chief, were you letting the dog in, or did you want to pause the video right there?
No, I'm good. I wanted to pause the video back when he said, was that Nathan Thompson speaking, talking about the ball? I was letting the dog in, yeah, but was that Nathan Thompson speaking about the Earth as a ball of gas in space? Because when I heard that earlier, the only thing I think of was the video that you made where you showed, I think it was a bag of chips or something going up into a high Earth atmosphere, expanding and exploding, which is exactly what I think that was Nathan Thompson speaking. Said, but he also mischaracterizes Earth as a giant ball of gas. Earth is a solid object.
Yeah, it's
much with liquid, gas, matter. You know, it's
a whole.
It's far from a ball of gas in space. I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, even when you talk about like something like a gas giant, they have super dense cores. They're not entirely made of gas. So nothing is just a ball of gas in the universe, except maybe like a nebula.
Well, you know, as Kyle brings up, you know, we do have gas giants in the universe, in our solar system. You know, for example, Jupiter and Saturn. The sun is made primarily of hydrogen and helium, which are gases. So, you know, if you want to see an example of gas without a container, all you have to do is look at Jupiter. It's a spherical planet without a container, and it's got, you know, you can clearly see at least 4 moons orbiting it gravitationally. And, you know, I mean, there it is right there. But, you know, the problem that you run into is that in order for gas to escape the Earth, it has to reach escape velocity. And there is a acceleration acting against that in the form of 9.8 meters per second squared towards the center of the Earth that slows the gas down, which wants to expand in all directions. But it slows it down in the opposite direction of the force of the acceleration, bringing it down to the ground. You still have to overcome escape velocity to leave the atmosphere. And that's why we still have gas around the Earth.
Yep. And that's another thing they misunderstand too, is mass versus density. They, you know, the gravity, the amount of the gravitational effect felt by an object is directly correlated to its mass, not its density. And I think that's a huge fundamental misunderstanding. I'm sure they'll mention it though, so I'll save that for when that inevitably comes up.
All righty. Let's go back to the video.
How are you containing that gas?
Sorry, what I don't know what you're talking about. What's the Kármán line?
Wait.
Sorry, I like that. So I just want to answer to my question. What's the Kármán line? You said it's arbitrary. That's as much as I got as a description for what this is.
No.
It is what we've defined as the boundary between the atmosphere and space.
Boundary? Sorry. Boundary?
There it is. Boundary.
Yeah, well, it's not a physical thing. It's literally just the point where we consider it to be space and not atmosphere anymore.
What's a boundary?
He's trying to argue the point that there's a hard boundary, but that the caller was saying that there was a hard boundary between the atmosphere and space. All the caller said was that there's a rough area that we consider to be the place where it becomes space. And he's trying to say that the caller was saying there was a hard boundary?
Well, because he called it arbitrary, so he used the term arbitrary line at some point, it sounds like, and so they're clinging to this desperately because it's arbitrary and it's a boundary, but it's also not real. They're using that to be like, oh, it's imaginary and you're insane. But you know, the misunderstanding with the Kármán line is the Kármán line isn't actually the point at which atmosphere becomes space. It's only federal purposes from a like a drawing lines in the sand sort of perspective. The Kármán line doesn't mean anything when it comes to where the atmosphere of the Earth is, how far it continues, because the atmosphere goes beyond the Kármán line.
Yeah, obviously there's atmosphere.
Well, actually,
particles above the Kármán line.
Let me go ahead and correct both of you. The Kármán line is a real thing.
Well, I know it's real.
It's a very real thing, and there is a definition of what the Kármán line is physically. When an aircraft flies through the air, its wings generate lift, and that lift is directly proportionate to the velocity of the aircraft. All right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a point where in order to generate enough lift to support the mass of the aircraft against gravity, you have to be reaching orbital velocity. That is the Kármán line. It's 91 kilometers above the Earth, roughly. Now,
so if you go above the Kármán line, then you can't
use flaps and ailerons. You have to
use thrusters.
Yeah, you're in orbit above the Kármán line.
Okay. Oh, so basically what it is there's not enough density in the atmosphere at that point to be able to use flaps to move around. You would have to use rocket propelled thrusters.
Yeah, you're in orbit.
You're in orbit. Like the density there is so low of atmospheric particles that you just can't use. You can't attach to it.
What you were referring to was the legal definitions, okay?
Yeah, just like the legal from the perspective of government.
Right. Now, the Kármán line is at about 91 kilometers. That's a weird number. So kind of by a universal agreement, we consider space to start at 100 kilometers because it's a nice round number.
Gotcha.
All right. That's 62 miles.
Now,
the United States Air Force gives you astronaut wings if you fly above 50 miles above the ground. So the X-15 pilots that went up over 50 miles, they consider that the beginning of space, and they'll give you astronaut wings for it. But the Kármán line is 91 kilometers or so, and it's a real thing.
Gotcha. Thank you for the. This is exactly why. This is exactly why I got into this whole topic, was because number one, I like science, but I don't know enough about it, and so every single time I watch a flat Earth video and am forced to do research to debunk that video, I learn 1,000 different things I didn't know before, which is great. And also, I also learned that flat earthers use the same 10 arguments just over and over and over again. So that's the best
same argument, different words.
Yeah.
Same argument, different words. Yeah, actually, Wolfie, Blue Marble Science, and I and Charlie, who is a telescope designer and worked in Antarctica for a year or two, we're actually in the middle of a series right now where we go through the 10 arguments of the flat Earth and debunk each one of them in turn to give people the ammunition they need. But let's go ahead and continue with this real quick.
I'm not gonna lie, Dad. I've been slacking on watching your videos.
Bad word boundary. Don't.
I mean, excuse me, whoever's talking. Hello, whoever's talking. Shh. What's a boundary?
Like a limit, a border. It's not a physical thing. Do you want me to say that it's a container?
I'm asking you.
I think he wants you to say. I think he wants you to say it's imaginary, and I imagine that it's real.
Oh, like
so. Okay, fine. What's on one side of this imaginary arbitrary barrier?
This is so funny.
On one side is atmosphere,
and what's on the other side? And what's on the other side of it?
Nothing in inverted, like in inverted commas. Nothing.
It's not a sky vacuum called outer space, the most powerful vacuum known to man, according to the religion of sky vacuums and spheres in them. It's not just nothing. It's 10 to the minus 17 Tor vacuum, according to your religion. Do you want to try again?
Oh my god. Oh my god. I just.
Religion implies.
Wait until you knew you were coming out on that one, didn't you, Broman?
Yeah. Oh my god. Bro, there's so much. There's so much. It's like, first off, 10 to the negative 17 torr. The first wrong assumption is that that equals a negative number, which I know that he didn't specifically say that, but I've heard dozens of flat earthers say that. That's ridiculous. And then I can't, the amount of confidence that this man has when he's spewing garbage, it just, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna relax for a second.
But you see, he uses that. He uses that specifically to put, the two things that he loves to do with his opponents is, number one, he likes to put them on the defensive, and two, he likes to irritate them.
Another thing is, too, when you think of people who led movements that just were straight up wrong when you actually put any thoughts into it, they were usually very charismatic speakers. He controls the conversation like nobody I've ever seen before him. Like, think about it like this. What convinced millions of Germans to become Nazis? A very charismatic speaker who knew how to control the conversation.
Yeah. When they go to this 10 to the negative 17 torr, first, I like to ask them what a torr is. Most of them don't know. And second of all, can you tell me, is that any different than zero? So why don't we just call it zero?
10 to the negative 17 torr is, it's about as close to zero as you can possibly be conceptually speaking, but it's not zero. Technically, it's larger than zero, which I still think most flat earthers don't understand. They think that it's somehow less than zero, which is, I remember in middle school learning how to take scientific notation. That's exactly it. Taking tiny decimals and converting them to negative exponents. And vice versa, doing the exact opposite. This is something we learned how to do and did every day for weeks. I just don't get where that lesson is lost.
It's not lost. It's purposely hidden. Why would they say 10 to the negative 17 torr when saying zero is so much easier?
Yeah.
And, what's the difference between atmospheric pressure and 10 to the negative 17 torr? 1 atmosphere of pressure. That's it. So, sorry about the dogs barking. I think I'm going to have to go down and spray them with a hose real quick.
I can't even hear them, man. You're okay.
All right.
Cool.
So, let's go ahead and continue with this.
But okay. I said it's nothing, which is a vacuum. Nothing
no, it's not. That's a violation of natural law. You see, you'd need a boundary for the gas pressure to press upon, otherwise it would expand rapidly in all directions and fill that available volume. It's called entropy. It's the second law of thermodynamics. So no, it's not a vacuum.
There it is.
Definitely not a vacuum. The sky is not a vacuum because the gas we're breathing would fill the space by way of entropy. Increase.
Remember the balloon, Spider? Remember you said the balloon would explode? Yeah. But we have atmosphere here on Earth. The balloon didn't explode. So we're not in space.
Right. But the balloon does explode in real life, doesn't it?
It does. So before quick question.
Point of order, Your Honor.
Quick question.
A point of order, Your Honor.
Go on.
He said that we define space as the Kármán line. Who is we?
I don't know who defined the Kármán line. I must admit that.
Okay, well, the U.S. military and NASA do not consider the Kármán line space. That's just a point of order, Your Honor. You may continue the questioning.
Okay, so the balloon, as it's rising up, before it explodes.
Now, I think that was questionable education, wasn't it? Didn't that sound like QE?
There was so much nonsense spoken at one time that I don't know how to pick it apart. Yeah. What did you hear specifically? How would you correct that?
Well, what he said was point of order. The U.S. military does not consider the Kármán line the start of space. Now, again, this is a difference without a distinction. Now, they start giving astronaut wings at 50 miles above the ground, which is what the Air Force considers the start of space. Legally, the start of space is generally considered around 100 kilometers. The Kármán line, which was developed by Dr. Kármán, is at 91 kilometers, and that is where an aircraft has to hit orbital velocity to generate enough lift to support its mass. So No, the Kármán line is not an arbitrary barrier. The Kármán line is a aerodynamic point in the atmosphere. So, it's not just something that we all got together at lunch and, over at NASA, with the NASA government Jew penguins and said, we're going to make the Kármán line at a certain point. All right.
And I love that that's what they think happened.
Yeah.
I think that a bunch of officials got together in a room and were like, hey, space is real because we said so. Well, how do you explain everything? Well, with science and squiggly math. That's it. We're going to confuse the whole world who can double check these things themselves with stuff they built in their own houses. It's also like the whole we secretly have a cure to cancer thing. Like, so every doctor in the world just secretly knows about this and they keep it to themselves because I didn't grow up as a human or anything. My decision to be a doctor was not at all influenced by my desire to help humans.
Think of the Hippocratic Oath, for example. You are literally required to help somebody in need.
The thing is, that class that I had, which was the super secret thing, where they told us about how good cannabis was and how we could all cure cancer, but we can't talk about it anymore. Yeah, right. And, for some reason, I think that I would probably have to push that a little bit if my mom got cancer. I might just have to let that out real quick. I don't know if I would have the strength of personality to keep the secret. How about you, Broman?
I know. Well, it's not even just that either. It's the concept that on a fundamental level, secrets don't really get kept, right? So, even from like a counterintelligence perspective, the best way to hide a truth is between two lies, not by hiding the truth in general. But we're also talking about things that scientists work regularly in the field. I think you're a doctor, correct? So there are things that you do that are confirmation day after day after day that the science works. And having incorrect science would mean that your results would be incorrect and you would immediately discover the deception. It's not a realistic argument from anybody's point of view ever. No.
Well, Brady's got the point right here. You've got to be a level 5 Mason before I can discuss the cure to cancer with you.
You sure do.
Freemasons only. But back to what you were saying earlier about how anybody can literally double check these numbers. Back when you said something earlier about the religion of space vacuums, that drove me insane because when you think of the word religion, that implies there's some sort of faith. When you think of science and religion, they're honestly completely different things. Science is based on empirical data that everybody can check and everybody has access to. Religion is a completely faith-based construct. I'm not going to argue the importance of which one's more important because that depends on the person, honestly. Yeah. But they're completely different things.
From a philosophical point of view, I almost kind of see where that argument comes from, though, sort of in the vein of like, I think, therefore I am. There's, obviously the concept behind that is that you don't really know that anybody outside of your own personal intellectual thoughts exist, which is, I know it's essentially useless, but it's an interesting argument to be had. When we talk about faith, any idea you believe does require some level of acceptance or trust in the source that you receive the information from, right? Now, obviously, with flat Earth and round Earth, there's 1,001 different things you can do and observe that are 100% in concurrence with what we would see if the Earth were round. But there's a ton of pieces of information that I accept that I haven't double checked myself. Even when we were learning about cells, I've never personally gone into a cell and watched endoplasm or mitochondria at work, but I trust the building blocks that lead up to it. So I think there's still an argument to be made a little bit about the concept of accepting something whether you've seen it yourself or not, but I think there's also direct paranoia that people who believe they're living in the Truman Show, essentially, which is just a whole nother level.
Hi, Mark. Shout out Mark Sargent.
Where is he?
Where's Mark?
In any event,
oh, Mark, I've heard so much about you.
Wait, where is Mark? Is he in the chat?
No. I said live in the Truman Show. Shout out Mark Sargent.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
but in any event,
too. I was
hoping he'd be here. But the problem that you run into is science if you look at things like the scientific method, the goal of the scientific method is to not fool yourself. All right? When you look at the flat earth, they don't use it to protect science. What they use it for is to deny science. So they adopt a very particular definition that they like to say is scientific method, and in reality, it's actually the outline.
Bullshit.
It's the outline of an experiment that we teach middle school students about so that they can follow the scientific method. It's the steps of an experiment we have them do, like salt water in an egg. The other thing that they like to do, and you'll see this time and time again, they'll redefine terms, not to make them clear, but to exclude the evidence they provide. Now, the classic is, when you talk about gravity, well, Newton described gravity, actually the effects of gravity, right? And then, can he hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Cool.
But Newton described the effects of gravity, and then Einstein, and Newton worked just fine. Then Einstein came along and gave a better description of gravity and, through space-time. So here's the argument that they make. We can't use Newtonian physics anymore because Einstein is superseding Newton. And then they say that Einstein is based on math, and math isn't real, so we can't trust Einstein. Therefore, since Newton's gone and Einstein's just math, there's no gravity. Welcome to Flat Earth.
Which is wild because you can use practical mathematics to solve questions you don't have answers to. If math, it's like even using just simple Pythagorean theorem to decide how far away 2 points on opposite sides of the river are is proof of concept that mathematics are able to solve a physical problem. But no, don't mention that. That's different.
Another thing is Einstein's work is based on the work of the scientists who preceded him, like Newton. Therefore, his work is based on Newtonian physics.
The darndest thing is that both of them say mass attracts mass. They just say it in different ways. But the effect of both of them is mass attracts mass. One is due to space-time, and the other is an intrinsic force involving the mass, an intrinsic force at a distance. But in any event, let's go. Hey, Brainy, thank you very much for the coffee. I'll get it from Tim Hortons in honor of your wonderful country.
Wait, did he straight up buy you
Only if you wear a flannel.
Oh,
and a toque.
It's okay. Sorry.
Why doesn't the gas that's inside that balloon fill the space?
Oh. Sorry, what was that? I missed that.
The balloon. The balloon example.
Were you trying to come in there, Slick?
No. I just like how there's always someone in the background, like they're hyping each other up, like they're a rap group or something.
Yeah, dude. Okay. I'll tell you what. If you want to take a pause and say something, just raise a finger, okay?
Raise a finger. Gotcha. I'll raise a. That's good. I'll do that.
That'll be our secret little Masonic signal, okay?
Yeah. No, well, then I got to raise 3 fingers and close my right.
Yeah,
eye,
you got to make sure that it's at a square.
Let me just draw an all-seeing eye on my face somewhere so I can light it up whenever I, you know what I mean?
It's right there, man.
What's stopping the gas, the helium inside the balloon, from filling the available volume prior to it exploding? What's stopping the gas from filling the space?
The
rubber and the pressure of the air outside.
So, to have the helium contained, it needed something around it, like a balloon, to stop it expanding in all directions, correct?
And the pressure of the air outside it.
So,
because as the air pressure drops, the balloon becomes too weak and can no longer contain it.
So the container fails and the gas fills the space.
Yes.
And what's the container around Earth to stop the same thing happening?
I just want to be really quick. The container around Earth is gravity. That's it. All right. Because that is going to be the next probably 10 minutes of the argument, right? Is container. It's gravity. It's gravity, and that's it. Anyway.
Well, if you want gas pressure without a container, all you have to do is look at Jupiter or the sun.
Right.
And any of us can do that with don't look at the sun directly, obviously. And I think that I probably need to put that out for the flat earthers in the audience. Guys, don't stare at the sun. But you can get a set of binoculars and you can easily see Jupiter. It's very clear in the sky tonight. And just to the left of it's Saturn. That's a little tougher to see, but Jupiter you can see clearly. That's a gas giant. Show me the container around Jupiter.
Answer that there is no container and that the thing that stops the gas from going away is gravity. But I don't like to. I mean, I'm playing into your hand here. If I say gravity, the next point is going to be
you just need to leave a pause at the end of your statement. So playing into my hand, I'm not giving a just so story here. You are. So gravity.
Nathan, I don't like to mention gravity because it is difficult to talk about gravity.
No worries, mate.
Because
no worries. What's that? What's gravity?
Right. See, but the thing is, I know the whole story. I know from gravity and to okay, I'd say it's an acceleration. It's a force, but of course it's not a force. It's an effect of something. You see, I know where you're going, but
isn't it interesting to think about the limits of why does it stop there then? Why does it stop there? Where else does it present?
Hold on, Preston. Sorry, I'm asking you. Sorry, mate. Mate, I'm going to summarise your point. Please, can you stop talking to me? Thank you. You said that the reason it doesn't do exactly as described by the balloon is because of a force that's gravity, but you know where I'm going, that it's not a force, it's an effect. So you understand that this non-force isn't holding gas here then? Is that what you're saying?
Now, this is the other classic Oakley tactic. And that is...
Gravity isn't a force?
Yeah, no, gravity is not a force.
Gravity's not a force?
Oakley's tactic is that he will tell you what your argument is. Now, look, Broman has gone through this entire thing and hasn't had to give it enough attention to avoid having to solve a Rubik's Cube. That's amazing.
I just wanted to do it really quick.
Sorry. I've got a buddy who can actually solve those in I think 33 or 18 seconds.
Yeah, there's so many people who can do it that quick.
I know. Those people are literally monsters. I don't understand it.
I'm still working on one from when I was his age.
They're tough, man.
Not gonna lie, I looked up the guide and I still couldn't do it.
Paul? He thinks that the atmosphere stops at the Kármán line, and the Kármán line is an arbitrary designation that is...
Notice that word.
We all figured out...
Arbitrary.
Yeah, we all figured it out over lunch one day down at the Masonic Temple, and it's absolutely amazing. But in any event, don't look. If any of you ever make the mistake of going on Oakley's show, do not go on Oakley's show. All you're doing is giving him views.
Wait. How do you get on Oakley's show? How do you do it?
You're going to be playing chess with pigeons. All right. They're going to treat you like this and then declare victory without knowing anything. Now, Oakley's tactic right here that he's using is that he's telling you what your argument is, and he's already got the counter to the argument that he created for you. Classic straw man. You ready to go back here, Chief?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready when you are.
No, I'm pretty sure it does, but the point is, I know.
Stop.
I know I can't.
Stop.
I know I can't fight with you on it.
Stop. No, don't just say, no, I'm pretty sure it is, and then carry on. No. You've just explained to me that it's not a force. So, no, it isn't. Let's not whistle past this. It's not a force, so it's not holding gas. Non-forces don't hold things.
Okay, you know what? Screw it. We're here already. Open up the book. Gravity is a force.
All right. So, from my understanding of it, Nathan is actually making the argument that gravity isn't a force. I remember freshman year learning about the 4 basic forces of the universe. Strong and weak nuclear, gravity, and electromagnetic. Come on, dude. This is literally freshman science.
Yeah, it is.
I was going to say, I guess technically speaking, if we're going pure relativity, gravity is not a force, right? Gravity is a warping of space-time due to an unequal distribution of mass. But for all intents and purposes, gravity affects the universe in the exact same way that a force would. So there is, you don't, unless you're measuring on a subatomic level, you're not going to run into inaccuracies treating it exactly like a force. That's my understanding. I don't know if I'm partly off, but that's the way that I was explained reading about Einstein's description of gravity. So I don't know how accurate that is, but I think that's what I was able to put together.
I would tend to agree with you, Broman. And, you know, like I said a while ago, I put together 5 conditions for arguing the flat earth with me. You have to agree to these 5 conditions. And condition number 2 is, condition number 3 is that we live in a Newtonian world. If you want to argue that Einstein is going to give you a different result, fine. You, sir, can do the math, and you can show me the different result that Einstein would give me that I can't get from Newton. And I'm going to limit you to 5 decimal places.
Oh, yeah.
So, but you see, now the one argument that I really want to jump on Nathan with, and that is that if gravity is not a force can't hold things to the earth. So therefore, things aren't held to the earth. But in reality, things are measurably held to the earth. Therefore, there must be a force acting on it. Tell me how that's different than your argument, Nathan. Does that make sense to you, Broman?
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, we can nitpick all day whether or not gravity is or is not a force, but absolutely 100%. Especially, you know, with the whole density argument, I have two major problems with the density argument. And the first problem is, why does density have a preferential direction, right? If we're talking about density is the reason that things are heavy, the reason that things fall, then that would only be happening because two objects of different levels of density would essentially be interacting with each other in the air, right? So we're saying the air is interacting with the bowling ball, which forces the bowling ball down because of their difference in density. But why down? Why not up? Why not left? Why not right? Why not diagonal? Why not any other direction whatsoever? It doesn't make any sense that down would be the preferential direction unless you have a universal downward pull, which density doesn't explain. And the second problem I have is that if the argument is that the more dense an object is, the heavier it is, then why can I take several rocks of relatively similar density and put them on a plate and incrementally increase the weight with every new rock? I'm not increasing the density, right? I'm just adding another rock of similar density. So if I'm not increasing the density, then why does the weight continue to increase? Mass, right? It's mass, not density, which answers every question perfectly. Anyway, I went on a tangent, but I think you got me.
Yeah, from my understanding of it, though, mass is just simply the size of an object that is there, whereas density is how many molecules and particles are inside of that object.
Other way around, kiddo.
Is it the other way around?
Other way around.
Oh, that's
yeah.
awkward.
You were close. You were close.
That's
but I will
try
say,
though.
Oof.
Paul Schober said it perfectly. He said, if you squeeze a loaf of bread, it should get heavier, right? Which is the argument I was using the same thing with snow. But like if I scoop up, you know, a bowl of snow and it weighs say 5 kilograms, and then I take that snow and I squeeze into a tight snowball, is it going to weigh more than? No, it's not. It's going to weigh the same because I did nothing to it mass-wise, only density. If density and gravity are one and the same thing, then I could stack 1,000 rocks on top of my head and it should weigh exactly the same. There should be no difference until I crush those rocks together into a denser object, period. Period. Yep. That right there breaks every single density argument completely, period.
Well, I destroyed the entire density argument the other day, and the sad thing about it is the people in the flat earth don't seem to realize how badly this destroys their argument. You take a standard bowling ball, has a certain size, right? Well, if you take a 16-pound bowling ball and an 8-pound bowling ball, they're exactly the same size, but their density is different. Drop them both off a building. Which one hits the ground first, the more dense one or the less dense one?
Same.
Now, if density controlled it, there would have to be a difference. If it was an outside force acting on the mass, they'd fall at the same rate. That's the end of the density argument.
I know. Well, that and I think they argue like, well, but feathers technically fall slower than other objects with air, but you need a vacuum, but vacuums don't exist. But vacuums literally exist, and you can watch feathers fall at the same speed as bowling balls.
Yeah, feathers are just the object everybody always uses as a basic example of a light object. You can sub in anything for the feathers. You can say 100 pounds of iron versus 100 pounds of McDonald's drinking cups. It's the same argument.
Sean makes a very good point here, too. A ball of metal is not heavier if you flatten it out to a disc. All right.
Yeah,
we all know
absolutely.
that it would be lighter, Sean, because a disc has less volume than a ball. Come on, Sean, you're slipping there, man. Let's go back and finish it up.
It's the macro scale that we live at.
But no, it isn't. It's the bending of pseudo-Ramonian force space, length, breadth, depth, and time. That's conceptual. It's not a force. Wait. You can think of it as a force, but it's not a force. Do you?
What did he say? It's the bending of pseudo-Ramonian what? Is that just made up words, or is that a thing?
I have no damn idea what he means by pseudo-Ramonian space-time.
I love when flat earthers are like, listen, here's the deal. If you take a quantum collaboration and put it up next to it's like, please stop. You know, you're not saying anything.
Shout out Lemon Bird.
Exactly. It goes back to the argument everybody made a while ago for which one was more powerful, the new Xbox or the new PlayStation. Everybody just compared the teraflops in it. It's like, that doesn't make one faster.
Although teraflops do, if we're on this topic for just a split second, teraflops do directly correlate to graphical intensity. So one could make the argument that individual games on the newest Xbox as it stands may have better graphics in the long run. But I don't think PlayStation is going to leave that alone. They're probably going to come up with an ultra model that has more.
Yeah, this was like 2 years ago anyways, but they just dropped the new model at their
did you see
conference.
It? Anyway, back to topic.
Yeah, back to the real topic.
The PS5 looks good. Anyway, all right.
And by the way, everybody out there, people who keep saying that I look too red on the video,
that's just how he is.
I really do look red.
Trust me, for years I thought his mustache was green. And I'm his literal child.
You understand that gravity is not... I haven't finished. Shut up!
Sorry.
I'll finish my statement and you'll reply when I've finished. I'm going to get pissed off with you real quick, mate. I'll say it again. Do not interrupt. Just respond with an affirmative based on what you told me. You have told me that this is not a force. So it's not holding, pushing, pulling, doing anything in that regard to gas. Because it can't. It's not a force. It's the bending of a concept. That's not going to force anything to do anything ever. So in rebuttal to how is the gas not expanding into the vacuum, you've said I've got a force that's not a force. So that's not a response or a rebuttal.
He did say it is a force, so...
I'm going to have to mute you, Preston, if you don't stop interrupting.
He's even being a prick to his own panel.
I'm going to have to mute you, bro.
Do you want me to respond?
You feel free to respond.
I've asked how the gas isn't expanding into the vacuum. And I've given an example with a balloon that until it exploded was being contained, and that's what was stopping it expanding in all directions to fill the available volume as per the second law of thermodynamics.
But
now, your explanation for why the non-contained ball earth in a vacuum with gas at high pressure isn't doing...
Sorry, but the balloon did explode. That they keep sidestepping that because his argument was, but it didn't explode because like the video of the chip bag going up, it didn't blow up, so that means that it must not be getting less dense, but it did blow up. Now he's admitting it, and he's not even at all accepting the fact that it's proof of density gradients, which is exactly what you would see in a fluid dynamic system like the atmosphere.
Well, he's counting on his audience not being able to figure that out. You know,
and they won't because they won't try to look into it because it's all
it's it's a pseudo-Ramonian gas pressure in an elastic media-based container.
He said pseudo-Ramonian space.
I know. I'm using the pseudo-Ramonian is going to be the new word of everything today.
He's just talking out of his butt.
Listen,
come on, I'm not talking. I'm traveling.
The pseudo-Ramonian quantum fluctuations of the inner ear are how we know the Earth is an oblong spheroidal tissue paper.
See, I'd start saying random words too, but I'm just gonna actually get them wrong again. So.
Now, the interesting thing is that he brought up a good point with the high altitude balloons. The elastic holds the gas, is a barrier on the gas, but the majority of the force that keeps that gas from expanding is actually the pressure in the atmosphere around it.